So without further ado, I'll invite Tom to come up, followed by Michaela and then Cheryl. Great, welcome.
Thank you. Right, how do I do this?
There you go.
Okay, right. Pizza. How do we do this? Is it cross?
Yep.
Keep going.
Keep going. Keep going.
There we are. That's us. Okay. Good evening, everybody. That's right. I've got 5 minutes. Has the time started?
Yeah.
Right. This is us. Luckily, I don't have to talk too much about this because I will be introduced. But we are a really small team. It's only 10 of us. But we're a group of like-minded architects, essentially, and we like to give agency within our practice to everybody to have a role in design. Touched on a few of these things, and we're going to be talking about this little award-winning project here, which we're very proud of, actually, called Rising Green. So our ethos at Freehouse is we architect fairly to shape real lives. You're probably wondering why that sentence doesn't make any sense. So architect we see as a verb. We see architecture not as just drawings. We actually see architecture like this. It's all really about being proactive. It's about conversations, about getting out there and talking to end users and using your skills to influence what end users are looking for, including young people. So this is very much the sort of picture you'll see in our practice here at Whitchurch, where to fashion a brief, we actually went and knocked on 1,000 doors and decided to do a participatory event in the park, so people could show in the community what they wanted to deliver in a community centre. Much better than drawing or writing a list. So I'm going to do a very whistle-stop tour and talk between this is what we had, this is what we're giving, and this is where we got to. And the journey we took with the young people of Haringey. So we were, as was touched on just recently, we were really brought on board in the pandemic. We were very acutely aware that stop and searches were going up. The areas of high streets just don't talk to young people. They're not set out for them to use or get involved with. There's a lot of distrust out there as well between young groups and people feeling quite unsafe in their own neighbourhoods, no-go areas and all the rest of it. So this was our site. We were given this, a single window, single aspect, which was not very easy to deal with. But in terms of architecture and servicing, obviously that's the easy bit. But actually what we were really more interested in about what it was going to be when we got inside. So first off, we were really, really keen. This slide's gone a little bit funny, but we spent 3 months at the beginning of the project actually looking at the right people to talk to. So finding those voices that aren't heard. Making sure that we actually started to learn from people, the experts in the area, people that live in the area. So we teamed up and we very quickly found the young voices from the area who became our project ambassadors. We were looking to create a place of practice, a place of performance and production, but in terms of what was going into those words was really left up to young people to flesh out. So I think what we did slightly differently, I think point of difference was that we hear a lot about co-design. What we like to do is co-authorship, where we actually believe that finding out what the architectural output will be is a journey. And if you can relax into that and go with the flow a little bit and allow others to have authorship, you'll actually find that the building will be a success when it opens, because they're the people who have actually authored it from the very beginning. We work very hard on our co-design approaches. We want to make sure they are continuous. We want to make sure they're sustained. One of the things we find with co-design is often it's promises made and then it drops off. Don't bother doing it if you can't follow through with it. It's more harmful than it is good. Talking only the other day with people in Lambeth, people just want to have a chance to understand. People just want a chance to listen and be heard. There's not great expectations out there. So we work very hard in terms of getting backstories. We use lots of things like Miro board and things like that to try and bring home how and those skills that people use. And in this instance, we wanted to learn about the sequence, how we can make the entrance more sustainable, more acceptable to people, and more safe. So we actually gave over the entrance to the thing. This is one of the things that we targeted as being a co-design element within the co-authored project. lots of different reporting methods, not many drawings. Accessibility is absolutely key, making sure people can see these things online and on paper, in workshops and meetings. So using technologies and skill sets, quality things that people understand, not drawings. The other thing we actually gave over was the idea of the brand. We wanted people to have ownership over the name. So we did a whole group with them where we came up with the name, your ship, what they thought of it, questions, my time is up, and it looked like this, which we didn't design, other people did. Yeah. The end.
Thank you so much. Okay, Michaela, we're going to come up here. And please keep questions to the end, where we'll have a very lively discussion. You want to finish your slides?
You can talk to me if you like.
So I'm from Salmon Fields. We are an arts organization that's working collaboratively with artists and communities in North Kent. And we create ambitious new art along the Thames estuary from Dartford to Whitstable. That's it. We are currently working on a project called This Must Be the Place. It's a 3-year program for local young people aged 15 to 24 from Ebbsfleet and surrounding neighborhoods, exploring and shaping Ebbsfleet Garden City as it's being built throughout all the design stages. By working with architects, designers, policymakers, and artists, we are creating opportunities for them to become cultural and civic leaders in their own communities. Just to give you an idea of this kind of the scale of the space. So this is I don't know if you're familiar with Ebbsfleet. This is North Kent, and there's Gravesend there, Dartford to the side. So Ebbsfleet Garden City is the first new garden city in 100 years. It's inspired by the Garden Cities movement of the early 20th century. And it's currently the largest housing development that's being built in the UK. So you can see it's quite it's encompassing quite a few areas. Apart from the pledge to community-led planning, walkable neighborhoods, and quality of living, the focus is very much on the amount of parks and open spaces in this new city, which is set to be 43%. Overall, it will be about 1,000 football pitches. It should be finished in 2035 with 15,000 new homes in a number of new neighborhoods. And there'll be about 9 new schools, 50 parks, including 7 city-scale parks, and over 3,000 homes have been completed so far. I'm only mentioning these numbers just to give you an idea of the scale. And so we feel, as an arts organization, this is a really interesting proposal to experiment with different strategies of how to get young people involved. We have organized over. So it's actually built on brownfield sites and also former industrial land. And what's interesting about this is that this is a land that was previously out of reach. So people that we are bringing to the site, they would have never have access to it prior to that. And actually, they don't have access to it now because it's all still fenced off. So we decided that how to approach this project would be to bring them to the site and kind of introduce them and connect them to the landscape to give them sense of the ownership. And these are just some examples. So we have worked with North Kent College students on their own creative response to the area. Overall, we've taken about 300 young people to visit the site, and some of them have responded with their own artwork. So this is just one part of the project where we kind of ask them to really kind of look at it. This is a bridge next to Ebbsfleet International Station, and that's being this week painted with their designs, with the students' designs. There are some photographs that they've taken on site. This is a fashion show last week with the garments they designed for the future city. So I'm talking really fast, but I'm really So being an arts organization, we have approached this project maybe slightly differently to what an architect or developer would do. We introduced them to cross-disciplinary creative practitioners. We were looking at ways of processing and experimenting with and communicating ideas in new, unexpected ways. We wanted to provide them with creative skills first, instead of handing them post-it notes. Don't do that. And we wanted to boost their confidence to respond to the current challenges that are there in the environment. We looked at the plans with them as well, met with architects. We were especially interested in the outdoor areas that are designed for young people. And we were finding out what interests this age group, how they would like to spend time outdoors, and what would it make it more enjoyable, inspiring. So here they have been looking at some ideas for the public space. They came up with this interesting list. Actually, what the architects fed back to us is that there was a huge amount of ideas that were quite community-led and also focused on green spaces. And they have expressed their ideas through making a flag. So this flag is actually on exhibition in Gravesend Library at the moment. We've also asked them to design activities for the public, something that the community might enjoy. One of the students designed this handprint wall, and that has been realized as a pop-up in a local festival. The idea is that all the new residents could put an outline of their hand and write the message for everybody else to see. And she's actually the student that has designed it, who is very young, 14 years of age, has run that activity on the day. So incredible experience for her. We have also commissioned artists to create new work with young people, for example, filmed by web analyst and Charlotte Ginsburg, who is currently working on film collaboration between two age groups of local residents, over 65 and 15 to 19. She has consciously skipped kind of the middle bit, because not interested in those. And that is launched in September. So we will, we're happy to have you for the launch. This is a APSLE design group we have set up. It's a weekly group for young people. There are mostly 15 to 18. And the idea is to train them in designing for the city. I think you talked about the kind of communicating things in the right way, because the language that is being used in the planning is not necessarily something they will understand. So even though, yes, we could say that they are invited to a public meeting where you're doing consultation, they will not understand the language, and they won't understand the stages of the planning, which is so important. What they have worked with planners and designers. They fed into design briefs and culture strategies as well, 2 different culture strategies. 1 minute. Of course. Oh, okay. Done. Right. Ooh, okay, great. What's important? Right. And advice to anybody thinking about working with young people: don't underestimate their creativity and wisdom. Treat them as equal partners in the decision making. And I just asked them just one more thing. I asked them what I should tell you today. So I asked them, what should the young people be consulted? And they said, we are the future generation living in the area. We will be living with the choices made today. We understand the needs of young people. And what was popular when the architect was born isn't now, and the design needs to be refreshed. Okay. So I'll just leave you. This is you can follow us on Instagram and website.
Thank you so much. Okay. 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I'm Cheryl, and I'm the founder of Archimake, which focuses on young people and their introduction to built environment. So I believe that in terms of the title, that we're really looking at our common language lying in the connection of a complex problem with the dreams and desires of a child. And we're looking at ways of dealing with the enormous complexity that surrounds itself with architecture and the urban environment. I'm currently working with engineers, which has really helped me to be able to do this. It's given me the skills which I didn't think I had when I just taught architects, because ultimately I had a lot more questioning of why do I think this and why are my thoughts arbitrary. And so I had to dig a little deeper, and that helped me to understand how to engage people without any prior understanding of art or what we come to start as an architecture degree. So the primary thing that we're looking at is this term particularly was looking at how everybody has individual preferences. So I'm just looking at a really small excerpt of what we do in Archimake as in the past 2 months, and that's a kind of landscape of what we do on a regular basis for the past 7 years, and moving forward plan to do in a much bigger scale in hopefully more mainstream education. So obviously children have a sense of being quite interested in themselves. So we thought this would be a really popular topic, and it was. And in a very disguised manner, help them to think about diversity and inclusion and think about the richness that the city offers and why we need diversity and inclusion to actually have a really vibrant experience in the city. So we began with looking at their rooms and understanding how different their rooms were, and we explored this through drawing. Clearly, we explored it through the plan, so also kind of the common language is about encourage them to learn technical skills which help to communicate to our audience, so otherwise they don't really get taken seriously. Then we looked at developing that further into thinking, well, then you've got the perimeter of your space. What's your dream room going to be? So we then explored that further in a sort of three-dimensional, quasi-three-dimensional format, introducing the elevation and the plan together to get a three-dimensional sense. So these are looking at how their rooms could be. We then looked at how they enjoy particular types of activities in their school or in their personal life, in the line of work, and what would they like to do as a career, and are they aware of the fantastic research that Frances Hollis did, an architect who discovered that there was no research on work at home, so she developed the work home, and that was her PhD, which then obviously became very popular during the pandemic. So we introduced them to spaces which are actually designed to support working from home, and the Eames House is an excellent example. Understanding about the importance of light and how you have certain activities around your work, and what would your spaces be if you were designing a place just to help you do that particular role in your life. And we had different examples of different types of roles that they wanted to do. And this is always a really great opportunity for them to think about, you know, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it's really wonderful to hear those kind of conversations. Then we sort of said, well, let's think about the wider city, urban space, you know, public areas, what happens there, how could your work role become a public and engaged activity, and how would you then design these spaces to spill out your private little domain of work into engaging that with others and bringing them into what you enjoy doing. So we had a really excellent array of different designs for public space. This one particularly was looking at kind of architectural classes out here, along with other sort of fun things to do like playgrounds. But, you know, they're all kind of really trying to think carefully about how you mix it up, think about everybody's different interests. We then said, OK, now you've got all these different ideas going around in your group. What happens if you put them all together and everybody's ideas are in one building? So how would that look like as a diagram? And we then have this really fantastic diverse diagrams with loads of rich explanations of what's happening in all these different levels. And I have to explain to you, this is done in 30 minutes. Okay.
Wow.
Students get given this task. We give them a 15-minute mise en bouche, a little kind of, you know, get started idea. And then they just go and create these amazing drawings. And that's what's really incredible, that they've actually got the ability to think really quickly. Then we go on to some lovely group work where they get to team up, and without ego, they choose one in the group and they don't fight over it. They're actually happy to work on someone else's design. And that helps them to pull together and create these amazing structural designs of what they've diagrammed out. And here you have some lovely you know, examples of the teamwork there going on. And this is just a really lovely example. We have online students, this child has been doing it in India, which is really exciting. We have another student, okay, thank you, in this student is in Turkey. So this is just a little bit of an overview. And then we have the idea of what happens if you bring sustainability into your project and you want to bring in biodiversity and water saving and you know, green roofs and biodiversity and all sorts of solar panels. So we have some further really exciting drawings. And the really lovely thing is that these drawings are really exciting and they're not really mundane. So we've taken a child to go from their bedroom to a really complex solution for a city building with public space in the built environment. And that's really our goal. If you want to see these and see them presented by the children, we actually have a presentation on the 1st of July in Samsung in King's Cross. And we regularly invite industry leaders and architects and academics, and Victoria's been invited as well on past, you know, so we have these on a regular opportunity so they get feedback from our, you know, our level, and we get the opportunity for people to recognise just how powerful children's ideas can be.
Thank you so much to all three of you. So before we have the next three, we've got a comfort break for 3 minutes. It's very important time tonight. So if you'd like to take a quick comfort break, please do so. Or if you'd like to turn to the person that's sitting beside you and maybe share some thoughts on what we've seen so far. So we'll be starting back in 3 minutes. Right.
And at the end, please drink.
Oh, yes. It's good to say that there'll be drinks at the end as well. And that's after our discussion. You get rewarded at the level of discussion with drinks after.
I know. So this one is like you're
Great to hear you've lots to discuss. Store it up for the questions. So we've got Ewan, Gabrielle and Polly. So Ewan is founder and director of Build Up here in Remington. It's a charity that runs projects across London for young people aged 10 to 23 to design and build public and community spaces. They aim to empower young people to shape where they live and make decisions about London's built environment and be representative of its communities. Then we've got Gabrielle Warshawski. Gabrielle is an architect and educator with a commitment to socially engaged practice design. He's a director of projects at Jan Kateen Architects, and he's worked with communities around London to bring forward stakeholder-led regeneration for high streets, town centres and housing estates for over 10 years. And then Polly Waterworth, she's Operations Director at We Rise, and she uses her 20 years plus as a qualified architect to help run We Rise, which is an award-winning Brixton-based community business that empowers young people to create successful futures through high-quality work experience projects and mentoring programs. Wonderful. Ewan, would you like to come and start? Okay. 5 minutes, go.
Thank you for that. As Lara said, we work with young people to design and build public spaces. Our aim is for young people to have a say in the built environment in London, and the young people we work with are impacted by structural qualities existing in the built environment around ethnicity, class, income, neurodiversity, and many others. So we exist because we feel all young people need opportunities and experiences to be who they can be today and can be tomorrow. Young people are fundamentally excluded from decision making in London, and the architecture industry is unaccountable for the communities it builds for. And so we feel that some of this is that the majority of the built environment is designed for the minority of people. So what we're trying to do to change this, we run practical design and build projects that young people run, manage, and lead. I'm going to talk you through an example of our process and how it works. There's some projects. So a project begins with a brief set by working with a community and normally a local partner. Young people then do a piece of design work and then feed that back to other people in their community, get a wider input. After that, they'll come on site with us and build the project. This is Aldrich Way again. At this stage, things didn't go quite to plan. The council and the police said, no, you can't have a shelter. If you have a shelter and people spend time together, bad things will happen. Projects on hold. We spent a lot of time fighting and compromise on the shelter, and stage became a pagoda. 3 years later, the community and young people were still keen for the project to happen. We spoke to the council again, and as it turned out, no bad things had happened. On record, nothing had happened. So they agreed finally with some leverage the project could go ahead, and we completed it here. So in terms of lessons, I think the first one is young people are incredibly good at designing public spaces. They spend more time in them than anyone else, and for that reason, they're often better than designers at designing them. And then the next part, I'm going to talk about some themes that are quite important to our work, that we're always sort of trying to navigate as best we can. We definitely don't have the answers to them. First up, purpose. This is really helpful for us, like being clear on what we're trying to do as an organisation. I think the third sector is maybe somewhat better at it than the architecture industry. But what it means is that when we face difficult decisions around how to work and what to do, it's quite a simple question that can help us answer them and work out what to do. And in our case, that is, will this be in the best interest of our young people? Next up, pay. So we are in this kind of expanding movement of young people in the built environment, which is amazing. However, it brings up a new issue of young people doing work for free in our industry. So this kind of field exists on a spectrum between empowerment at one end and exploitation at another end. And how we navigate it is quite difficult. So I think we always need to ask ourselves, are young people being paid? And then if they're not being paid, what are they getting in return? And is this good enough? Lastly, power. So youth-led projects in the built environment rely on power, money, and support of existing power holders in the built environment. However, there are times when these people and organisations have values which actively oppose your own as an organisation and as a kind of practitioner. So you're often faced with these kind of difficult decisions, like do you take on the project or do you not do the work and not get paid? And like that decision, I think everyone probably can feel is never easy. But I would say sometimes like some of the best decisions we made as an organisation had been to say no and be like, that is problematic. And on that note, I think I'd like to recognise this week our friends Resolve in their decision to call up the Barbican and pull out in their exhibition, which we consider very well done for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Gabrielle.
Okay, yeah, I'm Gabriel from Young Design Architects. Really love the theme for today's talk because we've been talking about designing through dialogue for years with our practice. I'm going to talk through a particular project where we probably had the greatest opportunity to test methods for test and enact methods for inviting young people into the design process. This is our common plan for, well, a common plan for Carriage Way. It's very much not ours. It's a shared, the name of a common plan, right, as opposed to a master plan, is to reflect that it's a shared vision for this public space in Thamesmead. Now, the project sort of starts in a very unusual place in that there is a site and there's a budget that's allocated to that site by Peabody, who own most of Thamesmead. But there's not actually a brief for that site, which in a way is the sort of perfect moment to start a project. I should say that with this space, we have 2 primary schools, we have a youth club, we have all of the residents and a particularly young population who lives in one of the most densely populated parts of Thamesmead. And this is a services way leave, which is the way to school. It's the green outdoor play space, which is just beyond people's back gardens. It's common ground, but at the same time, it's not. When we first arrived from the site, it wasn't quite meeting the needs of any of those stakeholders, among whom young people were clearly a very key group. So we like to think of design as a dialogue, and like any conversation, the introduction is very important. So our first move was to go down and actually have a giant tea party in the middle of Claridge Way. It's again, the timing of this was very important. It's wonderful to be able to introduce yourself at the very start of our project before a brief is established, before decisions have been made, and to set out a commitment that you're going to carry on that conversation, that you're going to be back to talk with people further, and to be very upfront as external consultants. We don't yet know that community. It's very much beholden on us to introduce ourselves, try and understand the existing ecosystem and connections. The second principle that this is doing, which we think is really important, is going to meet people and young people exactly where they are. We mean that both in the sense of meeting them in the physical space where they are, but also finding multiple ways of listening. So going to where they are in terms of kind of mode of expression. After that tea party, getting to know the stakeholder groups and the schools, the youth clubs around the area, we set out lots of different methods that young people could be a part of establishing the brief for that public space. So yes, that includes things like visual expression. There's many young people who are, they make the most wonderful models. I think we've already seen some beautiful drawings today. But there's lots of other methods. Some are great conversationalists already and are very verbally articulate. There are others who are most creative through doing and actually being active or getting their hands dirty. Then I think the other, so that's as far as listening goes. But what is our contribution to that conversation? Every conversation has to have 2 sides to it. So I think the important thing for us is to make clear that the design process isn't going to be an isolated linear process. We're actually proposing a continuous, that the design process is instead going to be a continuous exchange of social and empathetic gestures. And really that's where we find people, and particularly young people, kind of switch on. What we find really brings the project alive is the moment when you ask young people to consider how their relationships with their family, friends, and the environment are going to play out in this space. So we actually find that they really tap into that idea that you're designing with and for others, and that this is going to be a continued big conversation. So that led to briefs like this, which were for young people to think of imagine the carriageway as a playground for all the family. So as I said, the young people began to set the brief for us through for social space, gardening and play, and that kind of emerged through model making. It emerged through this mad process of VR modeling, which was actually the more important, which was actually a kind of incredible gambit or side tool for bringing out conversations and dialogue amongst the more articulate members. We did master planning and mapping, and then all of that input was sort of reflected back to young people in the wider community in this overall vision that we call a common plan. And crucially, that's not a single proposal. It's ideas from multiple ways that we can continue to work together, which are kind of scaled and tailored to the abilities and interests of all the people that we've met so far. We continue the design process from that point on, having established where the community's priorities are, through drawing and modeling, but also through growing, through getting down there and running exercise circuits together, and ultimately continuing that dialogue into the construction process, actually getting our hands dirty and building together where we can. We'd have loved to have done more. It was during COVID. And the benefits of that really are that we end up with a series of spatial interventions which really benefit from a sense of ownership and stewardship from all of the young people who were involved in their creation. Just a sort of final note, there comes that awful moment when we, unfortunately, as external consultants, need to step away from that conversation. And for us, the way that we try and deal with that is leave clues and resources throughout the work. Those might be physical things in the space. There might be kind of more ephemeral resources, which hopefully leave the people that we work with in a position to continue that conversation and continue that work after we've stepped away.
Thank you very much for that. Polly, finally, over to you.
Yeah, okay, so I feel like I'm going to be judged on what 5 minutes feels like. I've only got 8 slides and I'm full of bullet points. And I was dreading being at the end, but actually, I'm doing it's a bit of a summary, which I think is quite appropriate this day. So we run Brixton, these are our founding directors, and these are the young people on here, one of our first cohorts of young people that we worked with about 4 years ago. So we're a social enterprise. We turn real work commissions into high quality work experience projects. So clients come to us with a brief. We coach and support young people to deliver those projects. We generally work with 16 to 18-year-olds who are in first year, end of GCSE's first year A-levels. And what they get out of it is an incredible amount of insight, inspiration, information and engagement in the industry of whatever the commission comes from. We work in lots of different areas, but we do quite a lot of work in the built environment, and I am an ex-architect. Well, still an architect. So who do we work with? Well, actually, let me just say, so it's a big staff that we kind of close the gap between school and the world of work. And what's really great is that lots of the clients that come to us, commissioners of projects, want to engage with young people. They want to hear what young people have to say, which is really important because that's a real core of what we're about. We want to empower features. So it's like a real link between industry and young people's views. So we generally work with state school young people. 90% of young people work with a black or mixed race backgrounds, and we have quite a high proportion of socio-economically disadvantaged young people. So a very quick summary of how we deliver one of our work experience projects. This one is a classic example. It ended up being a film project. It's an engagement project about Brockwell Hall, which is a building in Brockwell Park in Lambeth, and Lambeth Council had some funding. And then the funders said, well, you haven't engaged with any young people. Everyone who's responded to your engagement is probably old and white and has a lot of time on their hands. So they said you need to engage with some young people. So they approached us in the 11th hour and said, please can you help us? So we said, yeah, it's perfect. It's exactly the kind of project that we do. And really, it was a film project because then you've got an amazing shareable piece at the end that captures everything that's gone on in that engagement project. So the way that we run it is quite intense. We normally do our projects within a week. We get a brief at the beginning and then we deliver at the end. And we coach the young people throughout it. So they have a Q&A with the client on the first day. They find out all about the project, and then they are the people that deliver it. So they have to think about what else they need to do to give the client what they've asked for. They think about the components, the research, who do they need to bring into this process. So in this particular project, they wanted to find out what young people wanted Brockwell Hall to offer them when it was refurbished and expanded. So they went out and asked young people what they wanted, and they did that by filming them in interviews that we could use on final film. They created a research, a survey, which is obviously designed by young people for young people. They went out and asked young people that, and they also engaged with some younger people about what to get them to do a creative exercise and drawing what they wanted. And then they edited it, they reviewed it, they wrote their script, they were voiceover, and then they packaged it up and presented it. And they worked with a professional filmmaker at the same time. So they learned all the skills on the job as they do it. So top tips from our perspective of working with 16 to 18-year-olds over the last 4 years. We keep our programs really intense so that it keeps engagement high. It's only over a week. Young people have to be work experience, so they're quite keen to come along and get away from school. Young people have the creative responsibility to deliver, but we coach them, or we bring them professional support where needed, and so that they actually deliver it for the client. But it's their responsibility, so it empowers and engages them, and it's their ideas, not our ideas. We don't know what young people want, so we're not telling them what to do. So how do we get young people in the room? Timetable and a paid for session to suit them. Our work experiences in the school time. Young people get time off school. Teachers give them time off school because it's compulsory. Know how to reach them. If you want to engage young people, putting something, an invitation, a newsletter to a public conversation is just not going to work. Instagram producing their working more. You've got to reach them through people who know how to reach them. People basically through schools and through teachers, or if you've got a really good mailing list, but that comes through reputation. So teachers always send out our invitations to projects. We always get oversubscribed because what we offer is really impactful, and the teacher sees change in the students when they go back after a week of working with us. And so we pay them as well, which is really important. So how do you make the built environment concept language more understandable? One-to-one, bring professionals in, work closely with professionals, young people, get sessions going so that no question is stupid. They can have, they don't feel like everyone's going to hear their silly question. That breaks down the barriers. Make them fun and interactive, make them informative, bring information about the environment, the building environment into it, make them creative fantasy, make them so like out there that then their ideas don't feel like they're silly and alienated. Make sure that young people get something out of it that they want. Leverage what you're doing. Make sure so that it's for young people. And they get a lot of experience out of it, and then they get that step up into the next level beyond school. If you want it to be part of the show, then give them creative control. And young people know what will appeal to other young people. They're much better at engaging with them in the conversation, so you get them to decide that engagement.
Thank you so much, and well done for doing the 5-minute presentation. And just as you finish, a rainbow appears just outside. Look at. Would you like to come and take a seat here, and we'll start some.
Just bring the stool down. Everyone's got a little extra.
Yeah, that's okay. How did we get through so many slides?
Well, technically, we didn't get through all. We nearly.
So I'll kick off some questions. We've got about 20 minutes, half an hour for a good solid discussion, and then we can have some drinks. So just to kick off, I'd like to ask 3 questions that are linked. Firstly, about our everyday and what children see around the city. And on the screen are 3 photos that I take. My children get indoctrinated about what's in their environment every day as we walk and cycle to school. And it really strikes me on a number of occasions that, you know, when we're passing signage, they will see, oh, there's snacks here, but there's actually something they can't do in certain spaces. But they're reading the sign and thinking that is something they can do. And, you know, this is a 2-year-old, so she or she's not understanding it at this level. And then when you think about planning applications on signposts in children's neighbourhoods, it's something that's very impenetrable. It's very hard for them to gauge what's going on, especially when it's a planning application for road closures, which, you know, is that long. And then when they see roadworks that are happening on their street, it's very hard to find out what's happening and who's behind it and how could they be part of that process. So if we think about the everyday, is there something that you think we could change that would make a dramatic difference to kids of all ages feeling like they could read the city and be part of shaping it? Who would like to go first?
Well, I would just say maybe obviously changing the language to something that they will understand, and also twisting things in a way that instead of saying don't walk this way, just, you know, say
ball
walk
games.
this way.
Yeah.
So I think that's very often, particularly I think what I have noticed in the FC design, FC City, they have these design signs, and there's like don't dive here, don't go on. So there's literally like 4 don't do signs, which is not very enlightening. So I think, yeah, there's different ways to
Change signage. Yeah. Anything else?
And I think that one of the particularly unique situations with where we're teaching is that it happens to be in King's Cross development, which is really sort of obviously designed to try to be immaculate and without any of this kind of regular city rubbish that we have to deal with. And it's a really interesting perimeter as well. I mean, the King's Cross development obviously kind of like had a few questions about it because it's got this kind of edge to it where the real London happens. And so we're quite blessed in a way in that we actually also do it inside Thomas Heatherwick, the KISS, but the same fun. So it's a beautiful building for architectural kind of like ideas.
So the kids are impressed.
They're really inspired, and they think, wow, this is modern architecture. I want to be part of this. Yeah. So it's really uplifting. And I do feel that there is a but then obviously the grittiness of London is also really rich, and that's something else to be thinking about. But I think one of the things with this sign is simply like it's obviously really too high for a child to even think about what's going on. So I mean, would we as parents want the sign to be lower, and then would we want the child to be stopping us on the way to the supermarket saying, "I want to read this"? Yeah, like okay, yeah.
Yeah. So where they kind of interact with information about what's changing in their environment is one thing, whether it's markets or not. Anything else that you think you could change?
Well, I kind of slightly on a different tangent there. I wonder whether these things are necessary in themselves bad. And actually, I wonder whether I find it when we're talking to young people, they're craving mentors, they're craving time to learn. I think we've kind of lost that somehow. We're all very hectic and busy. And actually, sometimes just the ability to stop next to all of these things and explain it is often what they're on. So I don't know.
things like QR codes, what can we not start with things like QR codes? You know, everyone, you've got to move the times. It is really difficult getting people know what you are supposed to do. Facebook, no, definitely not. You know, it's like looking at a QR code on their phone is actually quite accessible, and that can open the whole world. It could be linked to a whole load of other.
That's quite an interesting idea, isn't it? Because I think then you could have the educational purpose of what these things are. Because I think, seeing somebody doing this sort of scanning on the street, you could, I mean, that's a pathway into a profession. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a knowledge exchange right there. It doesn't have to look terrible, but can you access the information, understand what this is and how this affects that?
With communicating information, I feel this and like signage is kind of one end of like being able to, and then another end have someone telling you something. And those people respond to a person communicating information a lot better than they do an upload to a sign. So like when it comes to young people, and something that came out of a workshop we did years ago, it was like, well, if you wanted to engage young people in schools, when you go and as part of the planning application, protect the developer should present to young people in the school, and that discussion happens there. So young people, as part of their curriculum, are learning about the build environment and changes, and hopefully in some way inputting in them.
And if we were to move from, I guess, the everyday to think about the moments that you shared with us and these moments of intensity, like you mentioned, the moments pre-brief or post-brief or somewhere in between, have you found yourself thinking, okay, what would be the ideal to have children involved in the process of regeneration, city making, or even to get their ideas before there's another idea on the table? How do you think we can create a process that is much more fundamental to young people's participation? What would be the ideal process?
I'd love to see it put into sort of procurement and legislation, actually. I think there is a groundswell at the moment. We can see it's becoming more fashionable to do social value and things like that within bids. But the emphasis is inevitably on the consultants or the people delivering those projects. And actually, I think it needs to become something that is more like a Section 104 or something like this legislative, where you actually have the people who are doing the development have to put so much into that participation. Because otherwise, I think we get to a state where if you win one project and you're doing a lot of social value or engagement, then you can't afford necessarily to bid on the next project, and that it sets a funny sort of situation. And I think then if it could become, if you take out the financial race to the bottom by delivering something on cost, then you can get quality. So I think it's
I just feel like, especially in our project, it is possible because it's such a long term, but making sure that we get them engaged in all levels and all the stages of the design. So, for example, with our group, we are trying to get them involved in the kind of design stages, very kind of first design stages of the neighborhoods, and then hoping to bring them again to look at kind of more updated plans and making sure that they are there when the functions are being designed and when zoning is being done, not just bringing them at the end and they're just finishing touches.
Yeah, and it's quite rare to have a 3-year program set out.
But it's not enough. We have to go to the end, and there's still things to do.
So yeah, I would echo what people were saying. That strategy duty for young people to be consulted, and that would involve young people being paid, trained to input on forthcoming go around the projects, and then there will be a kind of push and pull, because that's there. There'd be more reason for developers and architects to work for young people. And one of the ways they could work for them would be in a paid capacity plan side, and have a pressure and a reason to want to be engaging young people as part of that process.
I mean, I think there was, a really interesting point there that you made in your presentation, which was also about the extent to which your client more forest potentially needed to do a little bit more to hear the voices of young people. I sometimes find that when we work with young people, they want to do or design things which are a little bit risky, and there will be a lot of always certain cases that a lot of people will say no. I think sure. Our sort of architectural developer needs to hear the voices of children more, but I think the public sector body is an accountable one, and at the moment there doesn't appear to be a very direct route of accountability towards young people for those who might be the most natural position to have it.
I think the reasons that were given to me when I was talking to developers about multiple young people, and I just felt that it was really hard to reach them. But then we were saying, okay, we'll set up this design group for you, and now we have those. So it's kind of something that is
Yeah, I think someone else made a point about using existing. You made it. You using existing community groups and schools to make sure we are reaching people.
Really lazy thing to say.
I was going to say, I think also the time factor is a really important one, because I think the time for gestation of an idea and to just think about, because we're dealing with really enormously complex problems for the city. And that's one of the things that we're kind of maybe, you know, we've been doing this profession for quite a while, and we can forget how siloed education is in, you know, the curriculum. You've got different disciplines all separated and they don't work together. And the reason why I joined architecture, I went into it, because I love the fact that I could do it all in one thing. You know, the writing, the making, the drawing, the thing, you know, it was everything combined, which isn't what happens in schools. So I think that there's an importance to just recognise that it does take time for this kind of different way, this interdisciplinarity, and you know, how we work isn't something we can just say to children, okay, here, what would you do? Because I've seen a site for a planning-driven workshop in Folkestone. I think I was working on it with another school who were given the commission, and they were kind of, you know, they gave a really long presentation of really incredibly exciting architectural projects, and then they were given paper and said, okay, now draw your vision, and they were like houses with square windows and a door and a pitch roof. I thought, oh my gosh, really, you can't just expect kids to just come up with the goods because they've seen a picture.
And I guess
while.
that leads very nicely, I guess, to the final bit of this question, which is what are those fundamental changes we need to make within education that then enable this more fundamental process of children being included? You've mentioned problem solving, in fact, which architects do tend to be quite good at, focused at. And then this idea of propositional making. So they're not always reacting to a problem, but actually being taught how to be propositional about what could actually improve things before they're reacting to something that's already bad, which I think sometimes we're not so good at encouraging. But is there anything else that you think that we need to add to this message that allows for this fundamental shift? Because ultimately we're talking about space to support life in the best form that it can.
I think it is thinking, and you know, accepting that not everything you will think about will work. And I think they are not allowed that at school. So there's only one way, and that's the right way. That's the
taking risks, which
taking it, just experimenting, not being scared to just maybe accept that you might take a route and then that it might fail, but that's okay. You can try something else.
Schools and also the architecture education are really good at teaching people to not recognise their experience and like they value personal lived experience in terms of what knowledge is. And like, what we find is like young people, when we're doing projects, they kind of the bit around like what people's experience of their neighbourhood is sometimes not always seen straight away as the right answer. But I think if we had an education system that could value these things, which are quite kind of common sense to people, we would have quite different cities in terms of what they look like and what they feel, and very different discussions around what the built around is and what we want to happen there. So you wouldn't get this weird situation where like you propose somewhere to sit and other people think it's outrageous.
I think on that note, also just about taking risk, because we've really seen it. I think anyone who works with different age children sees it as a huge demarcation in terms of risk taking. And there's a point at which children feel so concerned about their peers and whether they're right or wrong that they will be extremely conservative in what they propose. And there's a younger age which will be much more, I don't really know, I'm going to go for it. And it just happens at a particular point where suddenly everything, all the kind of really big ideas just disappear. And I think that that's something which, you know, once you're dealing with teenagers who are really risk averse and cautious and very, you know, peer concerned. So that is a different output, and they're all going to be thinking, you know, what's my son think? You know, is this cool or not? And you need to allow time for that to encourage them to, you know what's possible.
Feel safe as well in the space that they're expressing that.
I completely agree.
Right, shall we open to the floor if you'd like to ask a question?
Right, I'll start and stand. Although I've got tall girl energy, I feel like sometimes people can't see me sat down. Anyway, so my name is Aziz, and I'm a co-founder of a company called 2 to 3 Degrees. And it's a personal development company that inspires young people similarly with you guys, but helping young people to have a say in the built environment. And this kind of started, well, our Youth Voice program specifically within this sector started just after I left the GLA as a housing area manager. And this is linking back to my question. So from your experience, do you guys ever see that when there is a procurement from the public sector per se, that A, they check back in to make sure what you said you did, or the developer did what they said they did, said what they're going to do. And two, from your perspective and given some of the projects that you guys work on, and maybe the length of time is quite short and long, etc. But is there any checking back from you guys that the developer themselves actually does what they say they're going to do? And that's my main question. I also just want to ask a point, or say a point, sorry, which is, I think back to your original question, your first question, like I believe that strategic mapping is important. And so all of these projects are so siloed, and we're coming back to the table to have a conversation. But actually, if there was strategic policy making that mapped London, for example, just one area, and said, okay, what does the future of London look like for this particular theme? Now, all of us that do this type of work get commissioned in different areas of the borough, come together with different community groups to have that conversation, so that it's future proofing, so that when a developer comes in this particular area, we've already thought about what could happen, and then we continue to bring younger generations along the journey, a part of the conversation that's already been had.
Thank you. Two really critical points getting to the heart of this. So are you able to check back on some of your projects? Are you doing that because you care, or are you paid for it? And do any of the clients that you work for go on check on things?
I'm doing my job.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I find that when we work with local authorities, they're better. Usually in their contractual obligations to the tenant or the person. If we do things with like a GLA or whatever, then the good grade fund will stipulate they've got to do certain things. And so I think there can be, from the public side, they can lead the way, anchor those checks and measures and balances within contracts.
Just wondering, what time period are you often asked to leave? Check back in a year, 6 months, 3 years?
That's a good question.
Or is it varying?
It varies, yeah. But I do think we can definitely be more measured about this. And I think we need more data about it. I was talking again this morning. We're getting much better at mapping out carbon. We should be calculating our social value performance. Against you as a company. It's like, of your turnover, how much is social value to you? And start to map it, so then we can work out what is good and what is bad and what's working, what's not. Because I think without it, it can be a bit kind of.
Anyone else checking back?
So I guess the way we work is a little bit different to those sort of projects that do our kind of fundatory build up. So we pack those like a client, but also like a producer. In terms of funders, a tiny proportion of them know what's happening in terms of structure. A lot actually fund our project based on kind of paper-based outcomes. So it's quite an interesting relationship. But if this thing gets built and they've got no idea what it is, and they can ask what value is. And then, like internally, we do 2 things: do a sort of more organised check back in 6 months, but then we generally more informally have this network of people that we stay in touch with. So quite a lot of the projects we've got back on the other ones, and I think from that, it's kind of hard to kind of quantify it because it's a lot more kind of conversation based. But I think we've done quite a lot that way when we're quite small, so that can stay with the team.
Well, what about the follow-up comment and the question about, which we touched on very briefly, this idea of being propositional, not just reacting to someone else's brief or a problem that exists in a neighbourhood, but actually thinking about how we future plan and future proof what happens.
Yeah, I think that all boroughs should actually start with, rather than jumping in at the sort of engagement point. I think we should all take a step back and actually start, a piece of work that says, how do young people want to be engaged? And actually start with that question. And if you understand what and that should be a paid piece of work as well, by the way. I think that's really, really important. Incentivize everybody we talk to, it's like, make it worth my while. Give me a skill, give me some money, give me a voucher, give me, it's got to be something that's quantifiable. But yeah, and I think if you have that, map that through, that would be quite interesting, right? I'm thinking of it visually, and I'm thinking of that lovely city London model. Is there somewhere where we collectively kind of start to see that there's this thing growing, join the dots? I think it's a very strong idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much knowledge out there and expertise. And lots of people are doing this kind of thing. And why shouldn't we hit the ground running every time something happens? Why does everyone come along, parachute in another organisation into your borough to tell you how to do engagement in the borough? And it's really a tokenism. So it just wastes so much time. And it so
It
much.
doesn't often last either.
It doesn't last. Massive distrust and families. There have been some quite significant situations with distrust, like community, with lack of engagement and real engagement and engagement with the community.
My name is Mohammed Ashur, architect based in Dublin, Ireland, founder of social enterprise Place of Archer. I'm really interested in the process of making the community engagement co-creation beyond. So thank you very much for your amazing presentation, especially for the tips how to make it. I have a very quick question for Cheryl. What factor do you have for deciding on the age group? And question for Juan, do you have more tips for how to fight with the council? For Gabriel, what channel do you use to invite children outside the school?
Great question. So age-wise, we've got a really interesting situation just because we have small groups. So we actually teach from 7 up because we started younger, but we found it was easier if they knew how to write. So we kept being asked how to write. It was just really slowing people down because we don't have many staff. So we thought, okay, let's just start when they already know how to write. So it's 7 up. But the upper age is a bit vague. So we've had a 17-year-old, but that was really sort of like, whoa, that's a bit weird because that's quite different for us. So we actually have a mixed age group, and we just have them all in doing exactly the same learning component. And then exactly the same class. And it's really fantastic because we found that trying to rank children by age, it really doesn't work with regards to design and art because everybody has different skills. You can have a child of 7 just drawing amazing stuff and a child of 15 maybe getting to that child of 7's ability. So and you get that vertical learning that you get in architecture schools as well. So I feel like it's really nice.
Any tips on beating the cancer?
It's something called a power analysis, where you look at the people in your local area, what power they hold, and are they on side. You work out which are the ones you can kind of get on side and then can help make your case. So like in our instance, we're like, okay, who are the key local councillors that can actually kind of help argue that? And then are there amenable officers or amenable more senior people that might already have relationships with community groups? And then meet them, and then like, is there anyone else, or like a school, like some head teachers who would quite a lot of power? And essentially, it's a kind of like number power game, and you get enough people on your side, and especially if it's approaching election time, just will look far better chance to get the project to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, reaching young people outside of a school context is like, it's a big challenge. I think, in all honesty, as an architect, unfortunately, we're rarely involved in the place for long enough to build up networks afresh. I think one has to be very humble and look at what networks exist, like who is already out there working with young people outside of schools, and recognize that there's probably already people in that community who know much better than you. Speaking to them, you know, and then there may be a process of trying to win their collaboration. You know, what can you or what can the development process that you're involved with offer to them? But yeah, there's no easy answer. Sometimes you can access children through their parents, but they're probably children who you can reach through school as well. So classically, though, yeah, it's difficult, and yeah, so it's using existing networks and just really listening very carefully from those existing networks what type of event or activity is going to appeal and what people will turn up to.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Israel. Just want to say thank you all of you for your presentations. Really enjoyed them. I work as an engagement research consultant for a research company called PRD, and we provide delivery advice and impact evaluations to clients in the public, private, and social sector. But my main role, I tend to do a lot of workshops and focus groups and interviews with all ranges of people. So I've worked with young people in the past, and I've got two questions, if I'm allowed. First question is for all of you, which is if you have one big takeaway from working with young people, what would that be? And then the second question is for you, Tom, about co-authoring. In my line of work, we do a lot of co-design and co-production, but I've never heard of co-authoring before. So I wonder if you could just give a detail as to what
Yeah.
That's
the second question. So I'll bank that, I guess.
Okay, why don't you start with co-authoring?
Oh,
and then
okay.
we'll come back
Right.
to-
I was
Sorry.
I'd lose some time. Well, I think instantly it's a position of giving. It's not something that's sort of saying, right, well, this is my project and I'll divvy it up and you can do a bit. It's not co-design, or I'll look over your shoulder and I'll help you do it. It's like let's actually put ourselves on the same playing field here and say, you co-author it with me. It's empowering, I think. I think when you empower end user groups, you find those avenues to user groups expand quite rapidly. You get a sense of authorship, and people take that on. You know, so I think people run with it a lot more, and I really think that as we talk about when you check back in, sometimes we're not very good at checking back in. But if you've got somebody who's co-authoring that's running it, and then in the Rise of Green instance, it's let the cafe be somewhere that the community could skill up and then start their own stuff. Where they're making this thing last. They're the ones checking up on it. Why is it like this on the outside? It's actually what we took control of this and we wanted it to be like this around. So I think it's a state of mind, really, which is a funny one for an architect, because I think, again, we trained for years and years and years to sit in an ivory tower and decree what people should do and do a house style, and it will always be like this, which is you've got to kind of pick it a bit.
And then the first question. You might jump. You're a good thought.
I was just going to say, I've been thinking, because you gave me some time there, so I was thinking what I would say, and I think probably the one thing, and I learned this from teaching engineers architecture, the one thing is to not have any sense of boundary or any sense of that's beyond that person's ability, or I think that's going to be too challenging for this group of people. And having kind of got to that point with these engineers, just taking away all scope of sense of this is too complex for them to be able to do, even though they have no kind of prior knowledge of architecture, and just approaching that way with children, and just say, even though we have 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds in our group, sometimes if I have 6, we let them do it online with their parents. So you can have a supervision from your parent and you can join. But we actually say, look, we've been surprised by 5-year-olds doing section drawings of really, really imaginative things. And so that actually made me want to not impose any boundaries. We even had an 8-year-old in front of the screen in Samsung KX, and only people have been. It's about like 3 meters high and 6 meters wide. It's phenomenally huge. And an 8-year-old stood in front of that screen and presented his work to an audience of people. And you know, my heart was in my mouth. I can't believe it, you know, just giving them the opportunity to do it. Like, you know, if you want to, and they did. And they did, some of them did it because they just wanted to wear a microphone like a dog, you know. So that's a definite takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose picking up on that point, the challenge is for us usually maneuvering that space and time within a project and making sure that that can happen early enough. Because I think that's, for me, I think that's probably the first question that we were asked. It's really about those sort of initial stages that I think are the biggest impact, and this even a small impact will have a huge effect on the direction of the project, and that's where we're kind of open to the full range of young people's creativity. So that's not always easy to do. With our practice, we work predominantly in the public sector. Speaking of risk aversions, we have previously, people need certainty, budgets are constrained. Carving out the space for that uncertainty and that sort of lack of determinism, I think is really the key for me.
I'm just thinking what would be the but I think working with them in the last couple of years, I think my takeaway was that contrary to kind of popular belief, young people are incredibly sensitive to other people's needs, and it's that to the point where where we think we are doing maybe our generation would be, but actually it's completely the opposite. And we can really learn from them about how we can plan cities for all generations, really, for the whole community.
I guess that's saying. So I'd say listening, and part of that is like you listening, so I'm working with young people. But I think the other part is like, why would young people listen to you? And that's part of it. Like, why would they trust you? Why are they able to kind of communicate with you? Are you using the right language? Are you the person that should be having that conversation? So one of the things we do is like have a work placement program as part of like projects, and like so you're kind of paying young people who like are similar age or similar experience. I'm gonna have like conversations which like someone who's worked within a professional practice for 15 years is gonna find a lot harder to have.
I think we need to value young people. We need to pay them for their time. I think we need to at least pay them expenses, pay them for food to come. And I think we, as adults, we so often just assume that young people, because we think we know everything, they should value our time that we're giving them, and I think we actually should value their time that they're giving us. And actually, just a very architectural point that when we do the project, young people really don't like loads of glass on ground. They find it really intimidating. So that's just my answer. And do you want to come back to that first question?
Gosh. So back on the glass thing. No, I don't really actually. What can I say? No.
No, I think you've covered everything, and maybe a quick summary, just because I think we're out of time for questions. But we're going to write section 104. It's going to involve working with existing groups, not always satelliting in. It's going to involve paying young people. It's going to be propositional as well as reactionary to change that's going to be happening. And it's all going to be co-authored by young people in the process. Anything else? A few more little things? Young people are great. That could be the title for section 104.
If we do that, do you think we'll get looked after when we're old?
Yeah.
Back to the very start. Excellent. Thank you so much for wonderful questions. Thank you so much to the presentations as well. You gave us such a range of projects.